Hello everybody, I'm Neo. I'm a Warcraft 3 commentator for 17 years. The beginning of this week I was really pleased to see that our beloved game is getting another patch, as several changes have been pushed to the test server. Now, after giving my initial feedback on the channel and talking to a lot of people in the chat, whether that's players or other people in the community, I have made up my mind if this patch is good or bad and what it is missing. It is patch 2.02 and maybe you need a little bit of backstory. Obviously, Warcraft Reforged needed a lot of work since its release. Last year, we have gotten a patch 2.0 that brought a couple of new features, but the most important message for us was that there's a dedicated Warcraft RTS team. So this is the second patch of that Warcraft RTS team, and we'll see if they're doing a good job. The last patch that this game got was 3 months ago. That was mostly a cleanup job from the big release that I mentioned on November 13, which was patch 2.0. We got stuff like skins and classic HD and all that kind of stuff. But that didn't include any balance changes. So while we got a content patch 3 to 4 months ago, the last balance change was 9 months ago. Keep that in mind. It's a very, very long time, even for our old game. This Warcraft 3 RTS team has promised that it will fix what's broken. And this is the standard that we hold it to. Even with the big patch of 2.0, or maybe even because of the big patch 2.0, there's a lot of issues with this game, even though it is quite beautiful in itself. The problems are bad performance. There's two issues. One is AMD processors are really bad for the game. They just don't perform. You get FPS drops every couple of seconds. The second issue is that Reforged graphics, the entire setting of the Reforged graphics, are performing really, really poorly, even on new computers. And let's not talk about computers from 5 to 7 years ago. There's a lot of bugs and missing features in this. For example, as we see a lot of content creators currently grinding through the campaign, the save and load feature is pretty broken. Models just disappear. Some campaign missions are just completely crashing. And regarding the campaign, this campaign has gotten an overhaul to make it more playable. This has been scratched because there were a couple of bugs in it that have yet to be fixed. We're still playing an outdated version of the campaign. Another issue is Battle.net functionality. If you ever played on Battle.net, you know that some of your wins don't count, sometimes for days. There's only 5 servers, which is not enough, etc, etc, etc. Glaring issues. Plus, because the latest balance patch was 9 months ago, the multiplayer is getting a little stale and there is more and more visible imbalances with the game that hopefully this patch is addressing. This is the patch notes when it comes to the non-balanced part. It says fixed an issue that causes the game to hitch every 3 seconds for certain players. This is supposed to be the patch for the AMD processors. I have an Intel processor. I can't test this. I can't tell you if it's good or not. Then there's a couple of image screen fixes and lighting fixes, which granted was an issue after the 2.0 release. Unfortunately, no screenshots are provided that shows the previous lighting in comparison to now's lighting, so I don't know. So let's take a look. The AMD processors are allegedly being addressed. I will say in a bit why I think this is alleged. The Reforged graphic settings perform as poorly as always. Bugs and missing features are not addressed. And for the multiplayer part, there's an attempted address. Is that enough? We'll go into this in a bit. The AMD issue is persistent for over a year, maybe even 2 years. Even pre-patch 2.0, this was an issue. And we've heard multiple times that this is now fixed. And on PTR, let's be honest, this was never really an issue. This was only an issue alongside mouse lag and other performance issues on live servers. So just because they say it's fixed and just because of people report it's fixed doesn't mean that this will be fixed on the live servers. I'm still very reserved on my judgment. I will tell you once the patch is live if this is functioning or not, and if the poor AMD users are finally saved. Balance changes. This is obviously the big part of the patch. After 9 months, our game gets a fresh up. This is 84 changes. 48 changes, I'm sorry. 48 changes. And I have a couple of issues with that. If you analyze these 48 changes, 13 of these changes are coming directly from my caster colleague Remo Demo. 26 of these changes are coming from a community initiative by Don Dolare and Save Orcas. These guys are interviewing pro players and people in the scene over a month to come up with a consensus of what needs to be addressed, what needs to be buffed, what needs to be changed. This is a very conservative approach, as this is not meant to bring new features, new units, new spells into the game, but to address the status quo. 3 other suggestions or changes in this patch come from previous community feedback or unknown sources, but have been floating around in the community for a very long time. Since a couple of changes are overlapping, this results in 40 out of 47 changes are direct community suggestions, not only the direction of these changes, but the exact values. This means that the Blizzard Warcraft RTS team has come up with, to my knowledge, 7 changes. These changes are: the Orb of Darkness spawns level 2 skeletons instead of level 1 skeletons, even though a buff was suggested by Dondo and Save Orcas. Wards of Orcs are magic immune. Heal wards have their duration reduced by 5 seconds. Moonstone duration is increased by 50%. Orb of Venom does -1 damage. Mountain Giant food is reduced by 1. And Wand of Negation charges are buffed from 2 to 4. As you can see, those are not really groundbreaking changes. This will not revolutionize the gameplay of Warcraft 3. This is very rudimentary, I would say, and goes into directions that the community has been pointed out before. For example, the unusability of wards, the strength of Orb of Venom, the unusability of Mountain Giants in the one-on-one matchup, and the lackluster performance of the Wand of Negation that was only recently introduced. Taking community feedback and taking community suggestions is not an issue. It's great because the people who came up with these suggestions are deeply involved with the community, unlike probably the Warcraft RTS team. What is an issue, though, that these people are giving full lists of what should be addressed. A meme at the moment is, why would you reduce the mana burn range for the Demon Hunter? That is a suggestion by Remo Demo. And in itself, in the context of the proposed patches by Blizzard, it looks foolish to suggest such a thing. But do you know the context of that change? The context of this change is a massive buff to Night Elf expansions, a buff to the Keeper, a buff to the Podum, and other Night Elf buffs. Remo Demo says, if you do these changes and raise the level of Night Elves, then you can reduce the mana burn rate. All of a sudden, it doesn't look that foolish, does it? All of a sudden, it makes sense. Another thing, Remo wants Web on tier 1. And that, in the context of the Blizzard changes, doesn't make much sense. But his context is, I want to increase the tier 2 duration by 25 seconds. And then, Web should be available on tier 1. Makes more sense. The problem is that Blizzard is taking these changes out of the proposals of the community and throws them together into one potpourri. And it's only very few ideas coming from them. Remo Demo has released his ideas 3 weeks ago. Dondo and Save Orcas have released their proposals 4 weeks ago. What did the Blizzard team do since the last balance patch? I don't know. 7 changes in 9 months? I have an issue with it. I don't know what this team wants. What this wants for the game. How does it assess balance? What does it think should be addressed? what is the goal of this patch? What is the vision of the team for the game? Nobody knows. There's no explanations. There is no direction that this patch is going into. We can't assess a clear direction from this patch for the game. In my opinion, there's a couple of issues with this game, even though it's in one of the greatest states this game has ever been. But this patch, for example, doesn't fix human power spikes or the incredible late game strength. This patch doesn't address the glaring issue of Pally Rifle. This patch doesn't help the Night Elves, but nerfs them in a core mechanic, in a core player, the Demon Hunter. This patch doesn't target problematic undead matchups, and there's plenty. There is certain situations in human versus undead where one side is clearly stronger than the other, and vice versa. This goes in both directions. The undead versus orc matchup is very stale in a way that you can only play mass air, and that is not something everybody wants. We want the variety, and orc ground units would be nice to have in a counterable way. The undead night elf matchup is the clearest issue. But while the undeads get certain buffs that influence this matchup, the night elves get direct nerfs in this matchup, making a matchup that has been very, very one-sided. Happy hasn't lost in 9 months. Even more problematic. Now you could say, but Neo, they're addressing orc ground with the Tauren. They are addressing orc in a way that could break the game in 3 different stages for only one race, while not giving other evenly influential parts the same treatment. This patch doesn't provide cool new tools for the most races except orc, and it doesn't provide any new great interaction for most races except orc. Here's a quote from a community member that sums it up better than I could ever do. I mean, they didn't listen to players. They randomly selected changes from different documents and Reddit threads with a blindfold without any cohesive thoughts or purpose of their own. Splattered them into a badly written document without any explanation and left the community to not only point out the glaring issues, but basically creating an immense workload for the few that are able to give decent feedback, as fixing this list would entail not only removing certain stuff, but also adding a bunch of stuff. And that is exactly my feeling. I gave feedback on my Monday stream with people in calls that are not me, but players and community figures. I have a couple of issues with this, and I don't know where this is going. You can say, well, they were probably busy fixing the AMD issue, but that's a mechanic issue, right? That's a technical issue. Game design wise, I don't see anything in this patch. So maybe I had too big an expectation from a dedicated team in 9 months than just copy community feedback. I am disappointed with this patch. I know that these PTRs are an iterative process, and PTR 2 and 3 will probably come in the upcoming weeks. Until then, I remain disappointed, and I think this is not enough for this game that gets patches twice a year. Tell me if I'm wrong. Tell me if I'm an idiot for being hopeful for more. Tell me if I should give up on expectations, or tell me what you would expect from such a patch and what you are hoping for PTR 2 and 3. The game has enough issues to have fixes added in the upcoming weeks. I hope something's in the cupboard that will be presented to us over the next couple of weeks. Until then, we see each other soon.